Hi there, it's Linda from Lányos Handmade, and today we are going to make a new pattern from a new designer, and it's the Pennyroyal Pouch. It's from Cork and Copper Designs. I'll have the link down below for the pattern so that you can get one for yourself if you like. It comes in 4 sizes. I've got the 4 sizes lined up here. This one I'll hide in the back here. But anyway, it's got 4 sizes, so you can pick which size you like the best, or you can make a couple of sizes. Which size do you need? It's a really good sew because when you do the tabs up, you don't end up chewing them up into the bottoms of your seams here and, you know, kind of end up with gnarly tabs. But these ones turn out really well, and so that's a real bonus. I made 4 from fabric, and then for the video I used a material I'm not used to, this jelly vinyl, which is really cool. It's like a sheet of plastic, but it ends up sewing up to be quite fun. I love the colors that it has, and again with this one too, you follow the instructions and your zipper tab doesn't get chewed up inside. It's really cool because it's almost see-through, just depending on which colors you get, and it's got really bright colors. Now I will leave a link for the hardware I've used and for the jelly roll of vinyl that I used, and also I've got this vinyl that I used for the video. So I'll show you how to make one with the jelly roll vinyl from Galaxy Customs. This one's called Creamsicle and I just love it. This one is vinyl from THCG Supply, and the neat thing about this is you can get sheets of vinyl from her and mix and match the colors like I did, and you can make the pouch for yourself. So these sheets, some people say, what am I supposed to make with something so small, right? But it works really well for pouches. It works for the key fob pouch that I have the pattern for. It works for these pouches from Cork and Copper Designs. So you can mix and match and make all sorts of lovely things from her vinyl. So I will leave the link for her vinyl, THCG Supply, in the comments below, and I will leave the link for Galaxy Customs vinyl in the comments below, and I'll show you in the video how to sew with this and sew with this. So if you have this jelly vinyl and just want to jump ahead, I think the zipper tabs I did them at the same time together in the front, but then I sewed all of this and all of this. So you'll have to jump ahead to find how to do the jelly vinyl. Now, like I said, I made a bunch of them with fabric, and then I went on to the vinyl and the jelly vinyl. When I was sewing with the jelly vinyl, I cut with my rotary cutter, and it cuts really easy, this stuff. It's amazing how well it cuts. And when I sewed, I used a longer stitch length on my Janome, and probably about a 3.5 or a 4. And I didn't use a Teflon foot, although I could have with this. I still got away with not using a Teflon foot. I was very careful. You kind of get, whether it's bunched up, you kind of have to, you know, hand wheel it through. But it works pretty good. I was pretty happy with it. So I didn't really need my Teflon foot, but it might be easier for some of you just depending on what your machine is. I used Wonder Clips because vinyl always retains the holes that you put in with pins, so you have to use clips. And I just used Gutermann all-purpose thread. I didn't have to have any special thread. I did use a Microtex needle. I think it was a 14 that I used. And I did use the stitch in the ditch foot so I could get the top stitching on here absolutely perfect because the guide lined up along the edge. On this one I didn't top stitch and it still turned out lovely. I was just worried because it's a bit spongier and I didn't want to get bogged down with all the layers on my machine anyway. With this stuff, if it's hard to turn, you can take a blow dryer to it, but don't get it too hot. You don't want to damage it. Just get it warm and then it makes it easier to turn. I did not have to use a blow dryer because it was easy for me to turn. The other thing you might notice in the video is I kept saying jelly roll, and I think it's probably because I have a craving for pastries or something, but it's jelly vinyl, not jelly roll. The other thing is I didn't sew it with binding. You can sew it with binding, or you can sew it without binding. As you can see, there's no lining inside, so you can see the guts. And I'm perfectly happy with this way. It's kind of funky. But if you wanted to use binding, you could use binding too, but that's another video. So I guess let's get started sewing. I got this sheet of vinyl from THCG Supply. She has these little sheets so you can do little projects with them, and this one was just, oh well, it was on sale when I got it. I think this one was a couple of bucks. So this is the size of what we're dealing with. Let me get a pair of scissors so you can see, maybe get an idea how big it is. So I wanted to make this pattern from a few sheets of this vinyl, and I only had this one and this one left, so I decided I'm going to play around with it a bit. Now I could sew them together like this and have the fronts fancy and the backs plain, but I decided instead that I'm going to sew them together like this. So I will have a mix on the front and the back. So before I start actually working on the pattern, I'm just going to put some little bits of Wonder Tape to hold this so it doesn't slip, and I'm going to sew it together. So that way I can have a nice mix here. It's going to make it look even fancier. So that is the vinyl I'm going to use. I've got a zipper pull I can use and a zipper. This one has a little peacock on it. I don't know if you can see that, maybe against the white. These are from Atelier. And I've got my fusible fleece here, just for a little support. And my lining, I'm going to put this on here. I'll try pressing it, but sometimes it doesn't stay, so I might zigzag it around. It's not that thick. It's just, you know, just a teeny weeny bit. So I can go over and press these on to here and sew these together. And then we'll be ready to sew the pattern. The other material I'm using is going to be this jelly vinyl. This time I cut the pieces out on the fold. I had a big enough piece that I could do it. And this jelly vinyl is called Creamsicle, and it's from Galaxy Customs. And I'll put the links for these materials down below so that you can find them yourself if you'd like to. I haven't got the tabs cut out yet, so I've got some scraps I can cut the tabs out with. But, you know, they're not complicated. I'll show them to you when I actually use them. And of course, as I go along, I'll tell you anything special about sewing this jelly vinyl up. And I can't forget to show you, this is my zipper I'm going to use. It's from RC Threadcraft. And this is the pole I'm going to use. And this thingy, I've never used it. It's from Clover. I buy all sorts of stuff. But I found with this jelly vinyl that it really creases it because, you know, it takes a little bit to get this creased, but this really helps stick a crease in it. So when I'm doing the zipper, I will crease it afterwards. I'll show you so that it stays flat so I can sew it. So it really helps open up your seams. But I'll show you when the time comes how it works. So I think we're ready to start. I've got my Microtex needle in, and I have Wonder clips instead of having pins because, you know, the pins are going to leave holes in my vinyl. I've got my Gutermann all-purpose thread. I don't have my Teflon foot because this machine doesn't use a Teflon foot. And I've got my stitch set. I'm going to set it so it's, you know, maybe 3.5 long. So let's get these zipper pulls on. And remember when you're cutting your zipper tape that if they say it's 5 inches, double check to make sure it's 5 inches of teeth that they want or 5 inches of zipper, because we always like to have a little bit on the edge, right? But make sure it's the teeth measurement that you've got. And let's see if this one goes on just as easily. Oh, I forgot to cut this one. I have to measure it again. This is your long original leftover length. See, I've got little lines here. So I will measure that to double check it because I've got 2 sets of lines and I don't know why. And then I will sew this on here on the end. Where's my little clip? There it is. I'm going to straighten that out, trim it so it's nice and even. This one is going to be put on just like the fabric ones where you do all the folds like it says in the pattern. But this one is the raw edge one. So it's just going to be bent around, squished on there. And this pattern only requires 1 zipper tab. The other is the bent end. So I'm going to get these on first, and then I'll come back and show you what they look like. I gotta cut that shorter. Okay, I've got my zipper tabs on. This one is sewn on just like a fabric zipper tab because it's very thin vinyl. Make sure you put the zipper tab on the end that's always going to be closed, because this end you don't want to close it because it has to be able to open and close easily. So this is going to be the end that ends up with the bent zipper. Oh, that's hard to hold, as in the pattern. And on this one, this too, this is going to be the end that's bent like in the pattern, and this is the end that's closed. I made this, I tried the small one, the right size. It wouldn't feed through my machine. Maybe it would feed better if it was a Teflon foot, but I don't have a Teflon foot for this machine. So I used the trick of sewing on something extra large, and then I'm just going to cut it off. And the thing about it too is it's going to be inside the pouch, so nobody's going to see it. So it doesn't matter if it's a little bit different than it should be on the inside, because there, we can cut it off easily. That's how it's ultimately going to be looking. I'm going to cut these off later. I like leaving them along for a little while just so it's easier to handle the zipper. And that's the part that I was going to show you about this. So don't forget, you can make an extra big zipper tab if you're having troubles feeding the small one through your machine. Now when it comes to this vinyl, I'm putting these 2 pieces together with a little bit of Wonder Tape, and the side that's showing, I used a ruler and made sure this was square. You don't want to be showing a wobbly edge. And then after I sewed it on and it's ready to go, I checked both sides to make sure I caught it, so it's not going to fall apart. I put my label on, and I also zigzagged around the edge just because I like to. And I've also made markings on all my pieces like they say in the pattern that you should, so you can get your zipper put on properly. This label is going on here. This is not the proper label to stick on the sides, but I don't have a different label. But as you can see, if I stuck a label on the inside, it would show through and it would look silly anyway. And the stitching to stick it on would show through on the other side too, because there's no lining inside the jelly roll to put it on. So I'm going to leave it like this. If I sew the seam allowance and it cuts up too much of my label, right? Because you don't want to lose too much of your label here when you put your seam on, then I'm just going to pick my label out and slide it up. But this will help me remember that I have to stick my label on too.
I'm not sure how wide the seam allowances are, but I want some of my labels showing, so I might move this yet. I also have marked on here the markings that she says will help you stick your zipper in. So I'm going to put the zipper in on this one, vinyl, and then after I'll show you, and I'm going to put the zipper on the Jelly Roll one after so that you don't get confused between the two. So here's how it's clipped on, and I've got the little marks here that she requested in the pattern, and I'm going to keep the zipper and the tab out of the marks because that's the only way you're going to end up with your zipper tabs looking nice when you turn your bag, is if they don't get chewed up into the seam allowances. After I sew this along here, I'm going to do the same and clip this along here, but I'll sew it on first and then come back and show you. So let's get that part of it done. Now that first row of stitching was just to baste it on, and I just did it along the edge. I like number 5 zippers because they give you really wide space here to use. And sometimes they have a design on them too that makes it look really nice. I've also clipped it onto the other side now. And ultimately you're making sure that, you can check after you sew it too, that these are lined up nicely. You don't want them so far off. But if you're paying attention to the marks you've made on the sides and keep out of those marks, then you'll be just fine. So now I get to sew on my other side, and then I get to put my linings on top too. Okay, so now we've got both sides sewn on, and they look pretty good. And now we are going to put the linings on. I would like to have my lining, let's see, this is what it's going to look like when it's closed. And I want to have my lining with the label on this side, just because I'm fussy. So if I open it up and I put this together here, this one is going to be sewn on this side. So I'm just going to get a little clip and put it there. And I can follow it through, line it up with this one. From edge to edge. And nice and smooth all the way through. So I'm going to clip that down, and then I can sew it just the same again. And if you want to take a look again one more time, you'll see there's the outside and the inside. So let's sew some lining on. Now I've got this one sewn on. Remember, this was flapping loose down here. And if we turn it out, we can see what it looks like. I might not top stitch this one because this is very spongy, this material, and I'm not sure how the top stitching will end up looking. I might just leave it as it is. We'll see how it looks later. Now we can stick the other lining piece on. And of course it goes like this. So we'll sandwich our zipper in between here. I really should cut those ends off. Make sure this is lying nice and flat in here. The zipper's between, and we clip it around. And when you're sewing these things, you put these clips in, but when you're actually sewing, make sure you're just having every layer following the edge of the layer that you previously sewed. You want them all to be lined up nicely. You can always take a look and see before you sew it finally. It's going to look the same as the other side. Okay, so now I'm going to sew this and then I'll be back. There we go. I did have to kind of hand crank it over this zipper here. So be prepared that your machine might not like some of the layers. I did sew it on following the curve nicely. Every single layer follows the curve. And now we have these two pieces sewn together. If I wanted to top stitch, I would straighten everything out, clip everything, because this is vinyl, you can't pin it. And make sure it's all lined up nicely. Just the tops and the bottoms, because the outside piece is a different piece than the inside piece. So it won't line up, but make sure the bottoms are lined up. So I am not going to top stitch this, but if you were going to top stitch it, just top stitch from here to here along this arch. And along here to here. Along this arch. Don't go into the seam allowances. And the next thing we do, after top stitching, we line up our lining pieces. I could pin these because this is just a really lightweight fleece. And the bottoms, just to hold things together. We're going to sew the bottoms first, this outer layer. Up here, and then across here, and up here. And don't do these corners. Don't sew them, but just do the sides and the bottom. Okay, I've got the outer layer sewn, just the sides and the bottom all the way across. I didn't do the corners. And now on this side, I can do the sides and part of the bottom because I have to leave space to turn. And I don't do the corners. And this is your last chance to check and see if your zipper is open. If it's not, we can sort of stick a fingernail in there and drag it open, but it's easier if you make sure it's open. So, sides and part of the bottom. So now our lining is sewn and we've left a hole in the bottom. Now we can get our corners made here. Just, I like turning them one way and one the other way. And then they kind of hug together. So we'll clip this. And we can do this with all four corners. Now I do like to have this facing the same way on the bottom so it doesn't make a little bump. So just follow through with your stitching with your seam allowance that she gives you and keep this flat facing the same direction. So I'm going to sew all four corners and then I'll come back. Look at that, this one isn't facing the right way. Let's move it. There, now it is. There, I've boxed all my corners. This is a funny looking little thing. Now I can turn it. If this was something heavier, I might cut down the seam allowances, but this is a very lightweight vinyl and lining, so I'm not going to do that. So now we can turn it inside out. There, and then I'm going to fold this in with the seam allowance. I'm going to measure it because I like measuring it. And then I will just clip and sew along there, and we will be done. Okay, so this is sewn up now. And actually, because this is like a cotton, I'm going to go take this and press these seams with my iron. And then I'm going to press in between here just to try and get it used to being bent. Like there's the base. Of course, I can't do anything with the vinyl. So I'm just hoping when I push it through, it will hold the vinyl, help it stand up. Okay, I pressed it a little bit, just a little bit, just the lining. So now I can push the lining inside and poke the corners again. Make sure they're standing up nice. This side, of course, is nice and smooth because it doesn't have a tab. Everybody worries about tabs, but when it comes to tabs, if you can poke something in here, then you've won. That's what you want it to look like. Okay, so we zip it up and we are finished. Now the good news with our jelly one is that we don't have any lining to put in. This is all we're putting together. I've already clipped again my zipper onto here, so now I'm going to sew it. If I have trouble sewing it, I'm going to have to switch to my other machine that has a Teflon foot because this machine doesn't. But we shall see how it goes. So really, we're sewing the zipper on to 2 layers only, not 4 layers. So I'll get that done and I'll come back and show you. So my zipper's on my one side. Now I can put it on my other side. Make sure your right sides are together. It's kind of hard with this because it basically looks the same on both sides. So we line it up, make sure we follow our same route, same curve, and make sure that we stay inside the marks that she's given us. So we have to bend this again, right? And make sure it stays inside the mark. So I'm just going to follow along here and clip it. So now I can sew along here. So my zipper is sewn on both sides. Now I have to top stitch. And I'm going to press this down when I top stitch so that my zipper is facing in down. Got a little foot I can use that I could run along the edge here. Either my stitch in the ditch or my 1/4 inch foot. And it might help keep it uniform. I've also got this little brayer thing that supposedly when you press along here it makes a nice fold before you sew. It hammers some of the bulk out of it. And then I can use some clips too, because the clips, I've got some long ones. The clips will help hold that zipper down as I sew around. And of course, just like she says in the pattern still, don't go past your zipper. Leave your seam allowances free. So I'm just going to top stitch between there and there. So one side is sewn. The zipper was sewn on and then the top stitching was done. Now I can do that on this side too. And this brayer did help to push down tight so I could clip it. So now I'm going to sew between, like the instructions say, between here. And that will be the zipper in. Okay, we've got both of them sewn down. Now we put our outside layers together and we sew them. I'm going to clip here, like usual. Don't have to worry about turning holes because we've got the opening of the zipper. So sides and bottom, and that's it. Now, isn't that the weirdest thing you've ever seen? I've done my side seams, my bottom seams. I guess I should open this up. Now I can do these seams again, just like before. And after this is sewn, we will be done. Oh, little thread hanging there. I've got to cut the threads later. Make sure you get this bottom one lying in the right direction. I hear if you have trouble turning this, it helps to blow it with a blow dryer, soften it up a bit. So I will sew that and turn it, and we will be done. Okay, we've got our corners box. Let's see if I can turn this. Like I said, if you have trouble, you're supposed to get it warm with a blow dryer. It's kind of cute. What I am going to do is, because you can see this, I'm just going to open this up and join these two lines together. Flatten this seam out because it bothers me not having those lines joined. So I'm going to top stitch right across there. All done. So if you're worried about your sewing coming undone, you can... I pulled the threads through and I knotted on the other side. You can even stick a dab of glue on them. If you're worried about the seams popping open, you can always do a second row of stitching right beside, but this seems to be okay. This is going to be an excellent bag for keeping wet things in because it's waterproof and it's really cute. So how'd that go? Which sides did you sew up? There are a few to choose from, aren't there? You'll probably end up picking a couple of favorites out of the 4 that she gives you. This one's my favorite. I'm keeping this one. I don't know if it's because of the appearance or if it's because of the size, but I really love this look on this vinyl. It's so pretty. So I'd love to see what you've made. Please leave your photos in our Facebook group. If you have any questions, leave them in the Facebook group. Cork and Copper Designs also has a Facebook group, so I'll leave not only the link for the pattern there, but also the link for her group, because maybe you'd like to speak to the designer herself. So thank you for watching, and I hope I see you next time.